we are live. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Jacob.
Good evening, Mimi.
It's wonderful to have you here. And while we're just making sure everything is connected and people are finding our live stream, I just want to say to everybody, welcome back to Tea with Mimi. This is episode number 37, and I almost can't believe it is that many episodes from this project that just started during the darkest COVID days. We were all isolated, not performing, in our homes. And I just took my phone and started playing solo flute music and speaking about it. And it was a wonderful way to connect with people. But then as things luckily got better on that front and we did return to the stage, I had learned how to use this lovely StreamYard technology and host guests. And it's just been wonderful getting to talk with my incredible colleagues about music. And so tonight I'm just so delighted to welcome composer Jacob Beranek to Tea with Mimi. Thanks for coming, Jacob.
I'm so excited to be here. This is awesome.
It is, and we have a long history together, which we'll talk about
Yes.
as people get to know us more. But I just want to welcome everyone who's listening. Please say hello. Please share your comments with us. Let us know what beverage you have, whether it's tea or something else. And I am gonna introduce our guest, Jacob Beranek. He is a composer born in Wisconsin and based in New York City. Fanfare said of his music, "It is refreshingly upbeat and infectiously melodic." He was the inaugural composer in residence at Midsummer's Music Festival in Wisconsin, and his works have been performed widely, including by the Alias Ensemble in Nashville, the Band of the Castle Guards and Czech Police, the Gesualdo Six in London, the Euterpe Quintet of Seoul, the Brno Philharmonic of Czechia, and many other places, including by me and Dolce Suono Ensemble. So we'll talk about our collaborations also in a moment. But I was just so excited and proud of you when you won earlier this year the Charles Ives Scholarship from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. How wonderful. Congratulations and bravo.
Thank you. Thank you. And this flute sonata that we're about to hear tonight was one of the pieces that got me that award. So thank you for being the impetus behind that.
Well, I'll gladly take the credit for that, but no, but I'm so honored that that was one of the pieces with which you won the award, and congratulations on that again. And so Jacob has a bachelor's from Vanderbilt University in music and a master's in composition from Juilliard, where you're also getting your doctorate now.
Right. Yes, I'm in year 2 of 5 or 4. We'll see how quick I can do it, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So keep writing, right?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Rick Rosen is here. He's a wonderful choir director. Howdy, glad to be here. Rick, we love having you and can't wait for you to chat with Jacob as well, because he's been writing some choral music. So that could definitely be a point of interest. And you can also let us know what tea you're enjoying. Jacob, what do you have tonight?
I have a tea here. It's called Lemon Zinger. So it's an herbal tea. But it's one of my favorites. I don't fortunately have a sore throat or anything right now, but if I do, I go to that. So this is my little comfy evening tea. So
that's such a good one. I used to drink that all the time. Yeah. Well, I also
have Mimi.
Yeah, it's also herbal. So I have a Twinings. It used to be buttermint. It's peppermint with vanilla. I recommend it.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah. Good evening, Adrian. Good afternoon where you are. Thanks for joining. I think you're in the American Southwest somewhere, so it's great to have you. And oh yeah, Rick is definitely interested in hearing more about the choral music. That's awesome. Okay.
Wonderful.
We will really welcome everyone's questions and thoughts as we go. But I think it would be just nice to share how we met and when, because I've known you for about 8 years now. We were just counting.
Yes. It was, so let's see, 2016, it would have been the Young Artist Summer Program at Curtis. I was accepted as it seems ages ago now. I thought I was really big then, but that was, I was still in high school. And you were one of the guest artists, and that's where we first met. And I remember I wrote like a 1-page trial flute piece for you, and you performed one early piece of mine, and then we just got to know each other through that. Yeah.
Yes, and it was just wonderful to hear your music be introduced and kind of, we knew you were talented at that point, and then we were really happy when you submitted an entry for Dolce Suono Ensemble's second ever Young Composers competition in 2017 and won it. So we had the opportunity to host you and give the premiere of the flute cello piano trio that you work, and it had special significance because sadly that was the year after our dear friend and mentor and artist advisor of the ensemble, Stephen Stuckey, the great American composer, Pulitzer Prize winner, had passed away. So that was in 2016. And your piece, Sempre nella luce, I guess always in the light, reflected on your lesson with Steve.
Right. Yeah, he was, I mean, I wish I would have had more time with him, but he was really the first person to really encourage me out here in New York to that I had what it took to be a composer. I took a lesson with him in October of 2015. It really just out of the blue. I just sent him an email and I said, would you give me a lesson if I came to New York? And as I've now heard countless stories of his generosity and his kindness, it was completely in line with his character to say, absolutely. Brought me into Juilliard, and he listened to my music and he said, you really should apply to Juilliard. You have what it takes. And he was so encouraging. And then just a few months later, he was gone. So a very short, but very, very deep positive influence on me.
Yes, it was just such a beautiful story, and how you embedded that in the piece. Just it really meant a lot to all of us who are friends of Steve's. And, so that was a really nice time when we got to work with you, and then have just been following you and what you're doing. And then during 2021, Dolce Suono Ensemble held our Composer Lab project for young composers. And just for everybody out there, it's kind of nice because I think for composers, you get to be young longer than if you're a performer. In a sense, we had a range of ages. It was 30 and under, and I think we had about 12 to close to 30 in that group. And I think you were somewhere in the middle on the younger end, so that was amazing. But in the Composer Lab, it was an online project featuring solo flute works that I performed, and all of our 8 participating composers worked directly with me, and I made recordings of them, and we also interviewed you, so we had a fun little interview then together. And then you participated in a masterclass with my dear friend composer David Sirkin Ludwig,
right, whom I first met the same time that I met you, because he was running YASP, and now we both wound up at Juilliard at the same year, so he's now the dean of Juilliard, and he came the same year I did for my master's. So I've stayed in sync with him as well.
I know, such a small world. I mean, we went to Curtis together, so we really go.
Right. Well, yeah.
But it's nice that you've been sort of following each other around or something like that in your lives as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was great. And then just since then, seeing your music develop has been so wonderful. And tonight we are going to premiere your flute sonata. So I'd love to know how that came about. Well, I actually know, but let's share that a little bit with our listeners.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the flute sonata is just, I've always been just sort of in awe of you, Mimi. So I mean, I remember, all of us when we were at YASP, it's like, oh my gosh, it's Mimi Stillman, and we So for many years I've thought, man, wouldn't it be cool someday if I could write a flute and piano sonata for you, because you are, of course, the flutist par excellence in my mind. When I think of flute, I think of you, and I just waited until there was a time that I felt ready to do it, and I had some ideas. It was during my studies here with John Corigliano, and I said, look, I've got this project, I want to take it on. And he said, okay, great. And we spent several months on it in lessons, and it wound up to be a pretty sizable 3-movement piece, of which I'm very proud. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Your words are so meaningful to me, Jacob. And it was just so special when you came to my concert last season. Actually, it was the version world premiere of the flute and piano version of Irises by Joe Tian, the concerto for flute and orchestra that he then made into that version. You were there, and you brought the manila envelope with the score of the sonata inside. And for me, that was just the most exciting thing to unwrap and see. But I am just so deeply touched that you wrote this very marvelous, challenging, and substantial work. I mean, at 19 and a half minutes or so, depending on tempi. It is a very large scale flute and piano work in the repertoire. And so it's very exciting to share it with you. This is the online premiere that while Charlie and I played it for you and we got your thoughts and input, you haven't heard the actual performance we gave as a recording performance in Rock Hall at Temple University. So we're very excited to share that with you and everyone this evening. But before we get into it, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about your style, because it's been really exciting for me to hear different works of yours over the years as you've developed since, we met when you were in high school and now you're getting your doctorate at Juilliard. And so how about in the sonata? Well, one thing I specifically wanted to ask you, you have very evocative language where you title the three movements and in English words. So for me, when I see lots of descriptive words about music in English, I think of Aaron Copland, for example, who wanted to, in some of his works, use a lot of English there, but something like you start the first movement, driving, comma, declamatory, or calm, very slow at first. Calm is also something that Copland uses, let's say, rather than Italian or French terms, broad, imposing for the third movement. So are there specific influences from American or other music in this piece, and perhaps even in your work more largely?
Well, Copland is certainly one of them. I mean, I hold him right at the top of my list. Probably Copland and Brahms are my top two all-time favorite composers. And so yes, Copland is certainly a huge influence on me. Also, my Czech heritage. We've talked about this, of course, a lot over the years, but for all those watching, I have some Czech heritage on my dad's side, and that worked its way into the sonata. And what's funny is I went through a real phase maybe 4 or 5 years ago where every piece I wrote had some sort of Czech thing stuck into it. And it had actually been a while. And so this was the first time for a couple of years that I had woven in something Czech, and I worked in a folk dance, the furiant, which is a very a typical one. It was a favorite of Dvořák. It's the 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 rhythm. So that I snuck in to this sonata. But I would say on the whole, it was more the American sound that really guided me through it. I mean, at the end of the day, I can't help but be a tonal melodic composer. Corleano, in my studies with John, has certainly pushed me to see different sides of that same coin. And so this is a lot more sort of in the expanded American sound of a lot sevenths and ninths and that kind of world. But it's still, frankly, it's still in C sharp. It starts in C sharp minor and it ends with a big C sharp major chord. So I still think tonally throughout the whole thing.
Interesting. So was it something about the flute or writing for flute and piano that made you be in the more American vein for you, or voice?
No, I think it's just something I've been gravitating towards. I mean, I am American after all. So I think the more and more I listen to Copland, the more and more it resonates with me. And yeah, I don't know how much more intentional it just really suited the music to me. It was just sort of the idea I get whenever I write. I can't get a piece going until I have like the first 20 seconds nailed down. And so that opening, I had that for weeks, that boom. And so I had the first 20 measures written, and I was like, where do I go from this? And so it kind of sat for a couple weeks. And then the second theme, that lyrical second theme of the first movement, that's what opened up the rest of the sonata for me. Once I figured that out, it was sort of like floodgates. And the funny thing was, I remember sitting in a lesson with John, and he listened to it and he said, man, that the second theme of your first movement, he said, that has been stuck in my head for the last week and I can't get it out. And which was probably one of the greatest compliments he's given me. I think he was a little annoyed. He wanted a different melody in his head after a week, but so that I don't know. That's a sort of
no. That's a wonderful compliment coming from John Corleano. Absolutely, that your melody was stuck in his head, right? Yes. But yeah, no, and when you mention that melody, for example, it's interesting how you weave certain things throughout the sonata. Some of the ideas that happen in the first movement will come back.
Yeah. That's something that's always been sort of ingrained in me, the idea of return. And it's another thing, to stay on the Corleano theme, that he really has just ingrained in me in lessons the last 4 years, to say, we need return in a piece of music. It doesn't have to be a standard classical form, but have things present something, go away, and come back to it, very, very basically speaking. And so in the structure, I knew I wanted to bring something back from the first movement in the last movement. And so in that way, I don't know, it's a sort of, it's beyond a sonata. There's also a cadenza in the first movement, which is a little concerto-esque. So I like to mess around with form like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm thinking about French cyclical compositions, just to get musicology nerd on everyone for a second, because where I live in my head is often with French music of the fin de siècle. So if you have a sonata with some themes recurring, I will think of César Franck and what his contemporaries did with that sometimes, and how people after him maybe changed it for A.W.C. Ravel. Do you ever think of that in your writing, or it's a different?
Yeah. I would say that too. I think there's so many influences that just all jumble together and come out as me. If I really took apart everything, I think I would be astonished by how many things are actually working their way into my writing. Where in the moment it seems like me. But it's so funny. I was afraid at certain points in several pieces, this one and others, where I think, oh, this sounds so much like Brahms, or this sounds so much like Copland, and I play it for somebody and they say, no, it doesn't. And in my head, it does, and other people just hear me. So
Well, I think it's wonderful to have that knowledge of the canon. Often my favorite composers of today are totally unique. It's absolutely their voice, but they also have this deep knowledge and kind of heritage of influences there informing the music. And I think it's richer for that. So, but it's always nice to find out what they are, through conversation with the composer, when that's possible as a living composer, right? But you mentioned your Czech heritage and background, and I love so many Czech composers. We had talked about Dvorak early on in our conversations, but there's a composer that I know you've lectured about and I've performed frequently because he wrote so much for flute, Bohuslav Martinu.
Yes.
In fact, just last month, my Dolce Sono Trio performed and recorded his flute, cello, piano trio. So yeah, are you thinking about Martinu these days? And is he one of your many influences? Or
yes, he is. I think I have so copiously consumed Martinu for so many years of my life that he's going to be an indelible influence on me for the rest of my life. I mean, I have a picture you can't see right now, but on one of my walls I have a picture of Smetana, Dvorak, Janáček, and Martinu all together. They're my little quadrivium of Czech composers that I see every day when I walk out the door. But Martinu, it's funny. Dvorak was really my first love, and so he's always near and dear to my heart. I had a Dvorak bumper sticker on my car. I have Dvorak T-shirts. I'm a real.
You wore the Dvorak shirt at Yasps at Curtis.
Yes, I did. Yeah,
you're the only composer who did. It was great. I think I want one.
But Martinu, he's one of these guys that I just find his music so captivating, and it's so distinctly him, and it's still accessible, but it's still fresh. I mean, it took me a while as a kid to appreciate it, that I didn't have the ears to completely comprehend what was going on. And maybe when I was, I don't know, 14 or 15, it really started clicking for me. And yeah, he's great. So certainly Martinu is an influence in there too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad we're talking about him because he was so prolific, and his symphonies and large scale works are really not performed that much today. It's really the chamber music that would be known, for example, but absolutely worth just exploring his whole oeuvre, I think.
Yeah. Well, the fascinating thing with him is that he hadn't written a single symphony until he came to America. So he fled Europe in 1940, for obvious reasons, and he arrived here, and he had written hundreds of compositions. I think, he was almost 50 when he arrived, because he was born in December of 1890, had never written a symphony. And then suddenly in the next, I think in the ensuing 6 years, he wrote 5 symphonies. So to go from 0 to 5 in 6 years is just, it tells you something about, and yeah.
And in great part, thanks to Serge Kouzavitsky to
Yes,
commission him and so many other composers, including more emigres and refugees from World War II for the
right.
Boston Symphony. So yeah, it's that is fascinating to bring
Mhm.
up. Wow, how quickly he wrote. But well, getting back to you and your music, maybe we'll do an intro of the Sonata for Flute and Piano. And we mentioned a few things already, such as the Furiant, the Czech folk dance that comes up in the first movement. In fact, in rehearsal, Charlie Abramovic said, "Oh, a Furiant, what a wonderful idea. I'm always so happy to see that." Probably one of my favorite ones is Dvorak 7 is in that symphony, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
that definitely was not lost on us at the first rehearsal. The second movement, you dedicate it to the Virgin Mary. I'd love to hear about that because I know you've talked, and also even your artist statement on your website, for example, talks about the importance of your faith to your composition. So
Mhm.
that's something that you've inflected into the sonata, which would be interesting to hear about too.
Yes, yeah, that's I've I've always been a very, devout Christian my whole life, and I have struggled with how to bring that into art music because I don't consider myself necessarily a programmatic composer all the time. And so, you have people like Bach who Soli Deo Gloria, and it's very just all over the place. And I had always sort of envied that because I wanted my composition process to be a prayer. Um, and and so with this sonata, I thought, I don't need to make it about anything. I can just give it as a gift, and as a Catholic, with the Virgin Mary is a very central figure in Catholicism, and so I thought, what a wonderful way, it's not to get too deep in theology, but just sort of a gift to someone whom I feel is always watching over me and praying for me, and I don't know, it's we we tend to ask so much of her, and I thought, well, I'll give her a little gift back and dedicate the second movement to her. And it's a very lyrical, not placid. I think it gets pretty big in the middle, but it's not supposed to depict anything. It's just sort of a musical prayer. I have since arranged that for flute and chamber ensemble, and I just called it prayer. So that's sort of my thought behind that. Yeah.
Yes, well, it is very meditative, reflective. It does get intense, but there's also a beautiful placid quality,
Mhm.
especially at the beginning and end of the movement, that I think people will hear and react to. And then the third movement, there's a lot of very exciting bravura writing throughout the whole sonata. Yes, a cadenza for flute in the first movement is pretty fun and very virtuosic there. The third movement returns, but to, well, different material, but very fleshy from flute and piano. Lots of rapid scales, a tonguing, jaunty passages. So it gets a little playful. There's a lot of contrasting moods. Yeah, anything else you want to say before we present the piece?
Nothing, except it just brings me such joy to be here. I mean, even just how you were describing that when I was writing those passages, I mean, I could just see you playing them in my head. I mean, the jaunty passages, like, you have such a wonderful. I mean, you're so technically superb, but your expression too. I mean, I have always, and that's why the sonata is so wide ranging. I think is because I've seen you perform so many different pieces with such just utter stage presence and personality, and you can just captivate an audience. And I knew that I could put in the whole range of emotion, the whole spectrum, and you would be able to capture it. So it's such an honor to be here and to see this recording. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Well, you honored me with your words, with your music, and Charlie and I both felt it so much, and we're thrilled to present it to you. Hope you enjoy the performance, and to our listeners this evening. So, I'm going to start the online world premiere of Jacob Beranek's Sonata for Flute and Piano. Thanks everybody who said hello. Victor, thanks for being here. Rick, lovely comments. Please, everyone, feel free to share questions with Jacob and thoughts about the piece, and we'll see you afterwards.
I have to unmute myself before I clap. There we go. Oh my goodness. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Bravo to you, Jacob, on that extraordinary work. And thank you so much for writing it for me.
Of course. Yes. Oh my gosh. That was just thrilling to hear. That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And we're having some lovely comments from listeners. Thank you, Rick Rose, in commenting on the stunningly beautiful second movement and its achingly beautiful ending. I could not agree with you more. On Diane and Uncle Bob, thanks for your lovely words about the performance. And then Ronnie Gordon, our Dolce Suono Ensemble board chairwoman, and my mom. Hi, Mom. Writes, Jacob, the lad who won our Dolce Suono Ensemble competition 7 years ago. We're so proud of you. Congratulations on your brilliant and inspiring Sonata for Flute and Piano. Ad Astra.
Thank you, Ronnie. That's wonderful. I should say hi, Mom, to my mom and dad and Grandma. I think all three of them, I think, are tuning in. So
hi, Jacob's family.
Hi to all of them as well. Yes.
That is lovely. Oh, and Victor has left a lovely comment.
Oh, there's my mom.
Wonderful music. Thank you so much, Victor. Oh, Stu Beranek.
Oh, there we go.
Awesome. What an absolute treat. Thank you, Mimi and Charles, for such a beautiful performance. And your son's piece is absolutely remarkable. So thank you, Mrs. Beranek, for the comment. So it was so exciting. It's funny because you kept us working pretty hard in that piece. It's a wonderful challenge. But, and Charlie, unfortunately, could not be with us live this evening, but sent his warmest wishes and thanks to you. He also said that everything, not that it's not difficult, but everything just lies very well for piano. He found it very idiomatic. So one thing I thought I would mention is that you yourself is a pianist for our listeners.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I started as a pianist and have kept that up since I think I started when I was 7 years old. So I played through the whole part on my own. Of course, I didn't have to do it up to tempo and in a performance yet. I mean, maybe someday I'll have to play my piano part, but I wanted to make sure everything was doable. And I had fun, composing it and performing it alone.
That's great. Well, know that you could just play through it, of course. And you had mentioned earlier about just the American influence from composers, especially Copland, in your music, and the importance of the intervals of the 7th and the 9th, and certainly in harmonic chords as well. But as a flutist playing one line, I always notice if a composer has a sort of preponderance of some of types of intervals melodically. And some of my favorite melodies in your work, like in the very beautiful second movement, poignant moments, are when you either have a 7th or a 9th, or maybe the line for flute outlines those intervals. So there could be other notes in between them, but that's kind of the interval that you're highlighting. And I think it gives such a beautiful sense of either reaching up or perhaps extending down, which also is just a very beautiful, silky sound on the flute, especially in the registers that you chose. So I definitely appreciate those from a melodic standpoint as well. As
definitely let's see, da dee da dum. I mean that is throughout the piece, and it's it started to crop up in every other piece of mine since. I mean, it was sort of subconscious, but I found myself, it's like it shows up in every piece I've written now, basically, since the
Mm,
sonata. So there's something about those set of what, 4 notes.
yeah.
It's mysterious how our minds work.
Well,
But
that's interesting. I mean, you have a bit of a seventh chord, but not exactly in there, but like it kind of can go in different directions harmonically, that material, perhaps.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I still, like I said, the tonality is important, harmony is important, counterpoint is important. I mean, I was going through a lot of that, treating it, the second movement especially as a harmonic, really checking the voice leading and all. I was very, very careful about all that stuff. I mean, there's a canon in the
Mhm.
first movement. That's probably, I don't know if that's my favorite part of the first movement. I have so many favorite parts, but I really love that slow canon right after, well, about 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still do all those old-fashioned things because I don't think they're old-fashioned. I think they're timeless, and
Right, exactly, for a reason. They're kind of having that staying power for sure. But then in terms of just the flute writing, you put in some fun flutter tonguing. A few effects were put in
yes.
judiciously where you wanted to add a little different color. Also a lot of different articulations, double tonguing, or for a lot of you who just heard it, the quick staccato music. So a lot of separate tonguing on flute. But in the third movement, there's several themes with groups of three. So I don't actually triple tongue that because you put little bits of slurs. And actually, that was one of the things I think we talked about
Mhm.
as you were writing, just how to make articulation sparkle or sparkle more, or also feel
Mhm.
comfortable. But that I think the way that you use the flute articulation really gives it a lot of brilliance as well.
Thank you.
Mhm. We have such a thoughtful question from Victor Coco. Jacob Beranek, do you visualize the music you compose?
Hmm. Um, Visualize as in, I wonder, it like images, specific images, or do I visualize it before I write it, as in the performance? I wonder if Victor can clarify real time. I mean, I will say I always visualize it being performed.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily have a certain um, image in my head per se. I do tend to think in very abstract musical logic, if you will. What does the piece need next, and where is it leading me, and that kind of thing. But I think almost all of my yes, an image. I would have to say almost all of my musical ideas are generated by envisioning the performers, and of course, in this case, it was you and Charlie,
Mhm.
and going, what would I want to see them play? Like what would they sound good playing? That's really the first question. Like what would be good for them to play, and what would I want to hear them play? And then ideas come. So
That's so interesting that you actually think about the physicality of performance or the scenario on stage of performance visually when you're writing. And I think what is coming to mind with Victor's question too is, it's not a program music or like a piece of that has a story attached to it. But for so many of us, we listen to music and we see things, sometimes nature, sometimes we hear a story. We definitely feel a mood. So I wonder if that's also something that maybe Victor's relating to, or our listeners are relating
yeah.
to. I'm hearing that definitely happens to me. We have greetings from Brazil. Good evening. Curiosidades incríveis. Sorry for my Portuguese. Hello, everybody. Bom dia, or good evening. Buenas tardes. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so that was just so phenomenal to be able to share with everybody your sonata. Its next performance is coming up in New York, if you want to invite people to that. And then I'm going to ask you a little bit about what projects you have, other projects in addition to flute that's going on right
Certainly. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but the flute sonata is going to be premiered November 11th, which is a Monday evening at Juilliard. By two good friends of mine, both alums of the Juilliard program. The flutist is Tessa Vermeulen, and Ben Pollock is the pianist. And so they are putting it together right now. And I am thrilled to have Tessa has played a lot of my flute music, and she's superb as well. So I'm really excited to hear them perform it. So that'll be just on the free composers concert that Monday evening at 7:30, I believe it is, at Juilliard's Morse Hall. Um, but I have a recital actually on the 8th before then. So I have back-to-back things that weekend, and it's my birthday weekend too. So the Friday is a 90-minute recital of my music. which features some other flute music. I wrote a quartet for flute, violin, cello, and piano. And then Sunday's my birthday, and then Monday is the flute sonata performance. So it's just
Well, happy birthday in advance, and it's great that so many people can celebrate with you and your music on over that whole weekend. That is really great. And you have written a lot of chamber music with flute, Jacob, which I know many of our listeners, being flutists, will be happy to check out. I recommend the Wind Quintet also.
yes, yeah, that
Mhm.
is being yeah, it sort of has legs, as they say. It's a 20-minute 4-movement piece that I wrote in 2019. And it was the one that was done in South Korea. It was done several times in Wisconsin. It's been done at Juilliard, and it's the Milwaukee Chamber Orchestra, the Milwaukee Symphony Chamber Orchestra. Milwaukee Mosaic is going to be doing it in March. So it's a very fun piece. So yeah, that's another.
Yeah, it's great. No, I think wind players are always looking for more wonderful music to play to expand our repertoire that way. But the most recent piece that you sent me, I think it was premiered quite recently, is your suite for harp and cello.
Yes.
And I'd love to just share a moment of that. People will hear you in a very different idiom, sonically from flute and piano, but still with just two instruments. Shall we do the prelude?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I will cue that up. And while I do, oh, Martha Frampton, thanks so much for listening. She said, what a lovely way to spend the evening. Thanks for the music and the conversation. Well, thanks for sharing it with us. And everybody, you're welcome to let us know what you're drinking, if you're drinking tea or something else.
Last year's Bobby Kit sold out in 10 days. In celebration of Jones Road's 4th anniversary, we're launching the Bobby Kit 4.0. The kit is filled with our newest curation of effortless statement makeup. The kit comes.
It was YouTube, so we had an ad come in, but bravo.
Perfect timing, yes. Well, and that was such a fitting piece too, because that's my fiance playing the harp. So I wrote the piece for her, for Amanda, who's another student here at Juilliard with me. That was at a festival, at the Mostly Modern Festival, upstate over the summer, that they performed that. so that's another exciting thing coming up in my life, getting married in January. So
Oh, Mazel Tov. That's so wonderful. And yeah, brava, Amanda, and cellist Diana. That's a beautiful performance. But so such a mysterious vibe that I get at the beginning of the suite. So just
yes,
I think it will make everyone want to hear more of that beautiful piece.
yes,
Yeah.
it was fun. It was very fun to write. I was actually I was at a Passover Seder when the idea of that piece got going. She was sitting next to me, and the cellist who premiered it, not the performer in that video, was sitting on the other side, and they were both asking me, "When are you going to write a piece for me?" And I finally said, "Okay, look." And I mean, obviously, Amanda, I'm going to write many pieces for her throughout our lives, but I said, "Okay, how about I write a duet for both of you, and I can make you both happy?" And they said, "Great." So that was the piece.
Well, that's the best kind of command performance, right? So, yeah, that's so wonderful. But congratulations again on the music, on the upcoming wedding. And actually, we had a question from a flutist, Donna Stebbins in Sonoma, California. She hopes this will be pinned to my page. And yes, indeed, I was going to say that if you're joining late, this show, the live stream will stay up as a video on my Facebook and YouTube, so people can watch the whole thing, or if they didn't catch the whole sonata, you can go back or hear it again. So that will definitely be on. And it's just been so wonderful getting to share some music with you and catching up with you, Jacob. Yeah, and I know you've recently had some choral works performed.
Yes.
Other exciting things happening, and I'm sure everyone will want to visit your site to find out more. But what are your kind of immediate goals?
Yeah, so I just had a choir piece, Kent Treidel and Musica Sacra here, a phenomenal choir in town, sang one of my pieces, and there was another one before that's been done. And I grew up in choir. I didn't have an orchestra or a band at my school, so that was kind of my ensemble training was choir. So that's really what's near and dear to my heart. I've been writing a lot of orchestra music lately. Was very blessed to have a performance with the Milwaukee Symphony in September, and then in August a different orchestra piece was performed by the Peninsula Music Festival. So I'm doing now not so many large ensemble things. I'm writing actually a setting of 4 psalms right now for voice and piano, very very sort of simple setting, and then after that, we'll see what comes up. A viola sonata is definitely in the near future for a friend of mine here for her recital at Juilliard, viola and piano. Perhaps a solo organ piece as well. Another friend of mine. I'm getting all my friends in before I leave Juilliard. And those are kind of the two. Oh, and the other one is I was asked to. Well, I don't know if that's official yet, so I'll keep wraps on.
Okay, that'll be
on that. Yeah, those are a few of the a few.
Oh, well, fantastic, Jacob. Yeah, can't wait to hear more music coming from you. And I just want to thank everybody for joining, all our friends, all our family. Hi, everybody. We definitely look forward to any other comments and questions you have. If you're joining later and want to watch the show, we'd love to hear from you. I also want to take a moment to invite everybody to my next Tea with Mimi. Episode 38 will take place next Wednesday, October 30th at noon Eastern Time, which is 5 p.m. in Lucerne, Switzerland, at the home of Sir James Galway and Lady Jeannie Galway. So I'm just so excited to have legendary flutists, the Galways, joining me next week to talk about lots of fluty things and lots of other things pertaining to their extraordinary lives in music. So please tune in then, everybody. And also please join me at my concerts throughout the season, both solo and with Dolce Suono Ensemble. For those of you who are local to where I am at home in Philadelphia, our next Philadelphia Dolce Suono Ensemble Presents concert will be Sunday, December 8th. So all that information is on my website, Dolce Suono Ensemble's website, and everything. And we look forward to performing and sharing more music with you. So thanks again for coming. And once more, thanks, Jacob, for your stunning music and just wonderful conversation this evening.
Thank you, Mimi. It was wonderful to be here. And thank you for such a wonderful performance. You and Charlie. It was
Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Sounds good. Have a good night.
You too.